And now it is time to play Prelude. In order to learn it, I will try to simplify fingerings and bowings as much as possible. That means that I will stay in first positions and we will mostly use one note per bow. Now we'll start playing. I will play in tempo 8th note 60. Hopefully it will make it relatively easy to follow. And I will be stopping here and there to make interesting points to help you to study and understand this music. Let's talk about this beautiful opening. Right away, we have number of challenges to overcome. First of all, we need to figure out how to make a very clear yet soft sound playing the first note. This is an open string, so we will definitely benefit from making a deep breath and then playing when we are exhaling. This way our upper body rather, will go down, and that will help us to get more interesting color of the sound. The next step is to tune the first position. It might seem to be quite easy to find B with the first finger. However, the intonation has to be just perfect for us to hear this G major chord. The best way to tune B would be to play this note with the open D string. If you think that it doesn't sound just perfect, you need to try to adjust by slightly moving or even turning your first finger. The actual distance you will need to move your finger might be very little, but you will be definitely able to hear the difference. You can also tune the whole chord by playing first two strings and then adding B. Even if your intonation is perfect, that will help you to hear the beauty of G major. And it might be much easier after that to play in tune. Yet another very important thing to take care about is the angle between the string and the bow. Right away, from the first to the second to the third note, you have to move from one string to another. And it's always creating extra problems. It's very probable that one of the first three notes will squeak. And most likely that will be because you need to find better angle between the bow and the string. In order to get it right, I would suggest to playing the first 8 notes again and again. And perhaps you might want to use a little bit more bow, and that will make it much more obvious for you what to do with your right hand. wrist will have to be very flexible to accommodate those subtle changes. However, just make sure that you remember when open G sounds just perfect. We will have to play this note over and over again here, and that represents very important voice you want to show. So every time it will squeak, it will take away something from your artistic impression. In the second measure, make sure that your first finger is not moving from one string to another. In slower tempo, that might be a natural way to do, but once you try to reach a little bit faster tempo, that will not be helpful. What I mean is when you are done with E on the D string, you just slightly tilt your finger, you somewhat flatten it to reach A string, but you are not actually moving your first finger from one string to another. Here it is in yet slower tempo. And in measures 3 and 4, you have to be very careful with the third and later with the fourth finger to have round shape on the D string. If you're not careful with that, it will make it impossible to play clearly all the notes on the A string while keeping your third or fourth finger on the D string. You see the position of my third finger? I'm keeping it as round as possible. And in the fourth measure, the same you'll have to do with the pinky. Of course, you might find a way around it. For instance, you might lift all the fingers on the D string when you go to the A string. It might look like this. And in the following measure, it will look like this. I would encourage you to work on keeping your fingers round, especially if you're planning to play this music in the future in faster tempo. You will have to make many string crossings playing this music. It is especially hard when you have to use open A string. Open A string has notoriously bright sound, and in many cases it works against you. In this music, you want to make very even sound to show the long, endless line. And if open A string squeaks, that will definitely destroy it. In order to avoid this problem, I would recommend an exercise, playing the third beat of measure 7, just 4 16th notes. Here you can play it over and over again, making sure that every time you play open string, it sounds the way you want. What you can change is you could experiment with the angle between the bow and the string and amount of energy which goes from the bow to the string. You might also want to use a little bit more bow and then a little bit less to be ready to deal with it no matter how much of the bow you will be using in each case. This exercise will also help you to get used to keep your fingers round, especially pinky. In this measure, you can try to keep your third finger on the string, barely moving it between C and G strings, or if it feels too difficult or you're not getting sound you like, you might consider moving it from string to string like this. Either way is fine. You might even come up with somewhat different way of doing it. Your goal is to make every note clear and to avoid excessive movements of your fingers when you play in a faster tempo. G sharp in this measure, it's quite dissonant note. It creates extra tension. And I would suggest to pay more attention how precise your placement of the finger is. In other words, how precise the intonation is. Try to play open D and G sharp several times and get used to this tense yet beautiful interval. By the way, in music theory, it is called augmented fourth. In this measure, I would suggest to pay even more attention to F sharp, simply because this is extension and you have to play it on a C string. And C string being a thicker string and pinky being a fairly weak finger, this kind of combination creates extra problem. Make sure when you make an extension, you also turn your wrist at least slightly towards the pinky. This way you will use not only muscles here, but also you will just use the weight of your wrist and perhaps even elbow to make the contact between the finger and the fingerboard and the string as clear as possible. is one of the very dramatic parts of this prelude when the bass note is on the C string. So you play C sharp again, and then it goes down to C natural. It's very resonant, and it is very important to show those low notes, the notes which create hidden melody with as strong, deep, and beautiful sound as you can possibly make it. In this measure, music seems to stop. For a little while, you just listen to beautiful overtones of this chord, combinations of all the notes you play in this measure. And D seems to just fly away and disappear. So take extra moment to play it. This is the reason why in many editions this note has a fermata on it. You will most likely want to make a diminuendo playing this measure. And after you're done with D, it's time to move on. Try to keep dynamics on the soft side. It's very common to be somewhat uncertain what to do. I'm not talking about what you actually do. Of course, you practice, you're absolutely sure what you do. But in terms of music idea, you could try to project a little bit of uncertainty. Use less bow, perhaps stay in the upper part of the bow, and that will help you to develop this phrase after that measure by measure until it comes to another climax. I would suggest to avoid lifting the bow when you move from A to G string. If you lift the bow, then the phrase will be interrupted. And also it will be harder to start the following note, A on the G string, with clear sound. And yet another consideration, when you lift the bow for the audience, it works almost the same way as if you would turn the page reading the book. I think here you don't want to ruin the impression you are making playing the D with fermata and making it very subtle. This way, at the end of this D with fermata, you want the world around you to stop for a moment. And any excessive movement after that will definitely destroy the impression you are trying to create. My solution is to keep playing in the upper part of the bow after that, and just little by little move to the lower part of the bow, the part of the bow we are using for the most of this prelude. this measure, there is debate about which notes Johann Sebastian Bach actually have written. In some editions, you will see the notes I'm playing here. Other editions might have a little bit different notes. Remember, the original copy was lost, and in a copy, or rather copies, we have after that, there is some discrepancy. Here I trust German editions, Bärenreiter and Henle, the way they interpret this spot. But if you have different opinion, different sources, then you can play other notes. Just make sure you understand why with some recordings you hear different notes. It's definitely not because a cellist doesn't know how to play this measure. This is another time to breathe when music seems to stop for a little while. Some musicians like to play this slow D a bit longer. Actually, I tend to do it this way. And then after that, you restart the flow of the music. Again, a little bit lighter with less certainty until you reach the next climax. Remember that now I keep playing with simplified fingerings. So for those of you who don't have that much experience playing cello, that might be extremely helpful to learn it at least the first time. And I keep playing with easiest fingerings I can think of until the end. And that will make us to lose the second voice. In the following measures, we have the second voice hidden. I will talk about this with more details in the following lesson, and I'll show you the way to bring the second voice to the life, the way most of the cellists are performing it. So for now, we will keep using simplified fingerings, and as I mentioned before, that will help us to make sense of this music in our first approach. Even though I was using simplified fingerings, I tried to show the second voice. You notice that in those few measures, every other note is A. So I tried to bring out the note preceding this A. In every measure, that would be note number 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. So I was trying to make it a little bit louder. And that allows us to show this second hidden voice even without changing the strings and using higher positions, which I will show in more advanced version in the next lesson. And I almost forgot to mention that, of course, this is another tough spot where you have to keep your fingers as round as possible. Otherwise, they will be touching open A string, and that might create harsh and unwanted noise. And the last part of the prelude, we have to play using higher positions too. It's impossible to avoid it unless you'll try to rearrange it one octave lower, which will never sound good. In order to work on those shifts in measures 37 and 38, I would recommend you to play this exercise. Drop every other note. Play just the first, third, fifth, seventh notes, and so on. That will allow you to play all the moving notes, and that will work almost like a scale. And then you can work on the shifts without worrying about moving from one string to another. That will sound this way. And the last part of this prelude looks quite intimidating, but what will help to you is that you have to stay in the same position. Once you feel it right, it will be just the question of finding the different notes on the different strings, but at least your left hand will not have to make any shifts, and that usually feels much easier to accomplish. To play the last chord well, make sure that you work on both parts of it, playing the bottom note with the middle note, and then middle note with the top note. And after that, when you feel confident tuning it, then you play it the way it's written. Try to make sure that you don't spend too much of the bow playing the first part of the chord. Otherwise, you will not have that much bow to use, and that will affect your sound quality. The first part of the chord, G and B, I would recommend you to use no more than a quarter of the bow. And this way, the most of the bow will be available to play the top part of the chord, which will allow you to play it as long as you would like to. I hope it was useful for you to play this prelude with simplified bowings and fingerings. If that is challenging enough, please enjoy working on it this way. And if you're ready for more challenges, in the next lesson, I will work with you playing this prelude with more advanced fingerings and bowings. And we can talk about accomplishing higher level artistic challenges. But if it is too much, no worries. Give yourself time, enjoy playing it the way you can now, and move to Allemande. In the first lesson, for every movement of this suite, I will be playing with easier bowings and fingerings. And as I mentioned before, that is still very enjoyable and interesting approach to discover this wonderful music.